Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams Restored. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Hopefully, we get more new content and less old. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button as we push on forward. Chapter 7, Doubts. As far as human love, my life had been one heartache after another, and my earthly life had been filled with poverty and want. But still, a deep longing within my soul convinced me there must be something more and something better. God had always been in my life from my first indoctrination into fundamental Mormonism. I so desperately wanted a God who loved me and cared for me, but he always seemed so distant. However, there were moments, despite the poverty, of God lovingly providing for me and my family. I tried to hold on to those glimpses of God during my marriage to Verlin. And now that he was gone, I prayed for the fragile faith of my childhood when God would show himself at just the right time. While I was a child, mother's welfare checks never stretched far enough to cover even the bare necessities. We lived on the Jordan River in that rundown house from the age of 8 until I was 12. One month while there, mother brought hay and grain for Daisy, but the next month the cow suffered from improper feeding when the money was used to buy a ton of coal for the two stoves. Douglas would stake the cow along the riverbank to have fresh grass to eat. When Daisy would drop in milk production, mother rationed out the milk to his children. She bought powdered milk and mixed it half and half with the cow's milk. How we hated it. Daisy had to be the priority the next month. As fresh snow had fallen and the grass along the river bank was dry and scarce. One day, I found mother lying face down on the bed, crying softly. "What's wrong, Mama?" "I'm just discouraged." She sat up and put her arm around me. "We are almost out of coal again. I went out today to the coal pile and picked up every little piece I could find. We only have 2 small buckets left. We'll be completely out by tomorrow. But God will always see us through. He'll provide somehow." Mother prayed as we knelt in front of the fire, thanking God for the last few black clumps that were left for our final night of fire. Her shaky voice tried to conceal the pain and fear she felt as she pretended all was well. Her stories about the Indians that night were most informative. She told how they kept their campfires aglow by burning the inexhaustible supply of buffalo dung. But before I fell into a deep slumber, I excitedly thought that I could collect Daisy's cow pies and then mother would never have to buy coal again. The next morning, mother instructed Douglas, Richard, and me to put 2 pairs of socks on us each and to put 2 pairs of socks on each hand to use as gloves. She covered our heads with a towel, which would take place of a scarf, the things you don't think about, keeping our heads warm. Our mission was to walk about 45 minutes until we reached the railroad tracks. There, we would collect stray lumps of coal between the rails. I was only 10 and had a hard time keeping up with my brothers, but I trudged along behind them. The contest was to see who could fill their bucket first. It must have taken an hour or more of gleaning, but with the mission accomplished, the boys took turns carrying my loaded bucket, which was too heavy for me, the long distance home. We enjoyed the adventure of gleaning coal because we knew that we would be praised by Mother for helping her supply our needs. But less than 2 weeks into our coal gathering expedition, a railroad agent stopped all 3 of us on the railroad tracks. We were scared to death, believing we were caught red-handed stealing. The man explained how we were illegally trespassing on private property and impressed on our minds how dangerous it was for kids to be on the tracks. He said he would love to allow us to have the coal for free, but the railroad company would be held responsible if anything happened to us. He kindly sent us home with partially filled buckets, with an exhortation to never set foot on their private property again. When we returned with little coal, Mother promised us that God would provide more fuel to heat the room so we would not freeze at night. When the fire burned out completely, causing unbearable cold, Mother awoke. In a flash of inspiration, she got out of her cold bed and turned on the light. She scanned the room, wondering what provision he made. Carefully not to awaken Irma, she gently lifted her chill body from the love seat, placing her in the bed beside me and Becky. I awoke immediately to the sound of the crackling wood burning. Rising up on my elbows, my eyes blinded by the bright light, I could see Mother with an axe in her hands, hacking the wooden structure that had once been the arms and the back of the love seat. Wow. It puts things into perspective. She's so desperate. She barely has furniture as is. She already told us that the furniture was hard and uncomfortable. And now, because it's freezing and she's trying to keep her babies warm, she's tearing up what's left of their couch. Mother, why are you destroying our couch? God said he'd provide our needs. She looked angry as she continued chopping with her axe. And I surely don't need this disgrace of the couch anymore. If God can't give us something better, then I don't want anything at all. Then she tossed the wooden slates from the mutilated couch into the black cast iron heater, which soon became ablaze. Before long, the room became cozy. Then she crawled onto the foot of the bed beneath her 3 daughters' feet, curled up, covered herself with a couple of coats, and slept the remainder of the night. The following morning, Mother's sister, Aunt Rhea, arrived by way of the city bus. Even though they weren't sister wives anymore, she loved Mother and tried to look after her needs. It was Saturday afternoon, and small splinters of wood, along with pieces of flowered upholstery material, still lay scattered all over the living room floor. Mother was embarrassed for Aunt Rhea to see the house in such disarray. She quickly grabbed the broom, sweeping up the shattered pieces of the destroyed sofa on the cluttered floor. Rhea, forgive the mess, but it was so cold. I burned the sofa last night. The children have been freezing. As you can see, all we have for coverings are the wool coats on the bed. Her sister tried to be positive about her outlandish actions. She couldn't believe that Mother didn't own any quilts. She felt inspired as she discussed Mother's continual need for proper bedding. Olive, I'll stay and help you today. I have a solution. Let's tear those wool coats into pieces, then sew them into quilt tops. We will worry about the batting and the linings later. Mother had grave doubts that her children could still keep warm. She tried to make her sister realize that the coats with their linings would be warmer than any thin wool quilt tops. Let's make the quilt tops anyway, Olive. Give God a chance to do the rest. My mother and Aunt Rhea spent all day visiting this and sewing every piece of the torn wool scraps together, no matter how small. When they were finished, they made 5 quilt tops. After Aunt Rhea left, we again spent hours of discomfort, freezing in the night, receiving no protection from the thin quilt tops. Mother scanned the room, wondering what she could use to heat the room. She knew her only alternative was her bookcase, so she quietly removed her few warm books. Then, hoping the commotion would not waken us, she chopped it into pieces. She filled the heater with the boards and a pair of old worn shoes. From the quart glass bottle near the stove, she doused the wood with coal oil, then struck a match. The fire ignited immediately and soon took the chill out the room. While the fire roared, Mother heated bricks on the pot-bellied heater, then tucked them beneath our cold feet for added warmth. The next morning, she bundled us up in our ragged coats and tromped through the deep snow for 6 blocks to the home of her German friends. She visited all day, never revealing our real purpose for being there. She wasn't about to tell the Dowlings she was there to keep her children from freezing in their own home. After being served hot pumpkin soup along with white slices of Wonder Bread, which were a special treat for us kids, we finally left for home. That evening, Mother gathered us in a circle, kneeling for prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we ask Thee in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ, to please provide batting to complete our quilts. We ask thee not to be angry at our impatience, but we are freezing. We need batting right now. We plead for our desperate need in thy name, in the name of Jesus Christ. 2 days later, a blizzard beat down in the Salt Lake Valley, partially blinding all the traffic. The school bus managed to let us off as usual on the corner bus stop. It was at the end of the lane, about a half block long. As soon as the bus pulled away, a box truck passed the bus going in the opposite direction. The jolting of the truck jarred open the rear door as it slipped from side to side in the blinding snow. 5 unknown objects flew out, bouncing into the soft snow on the road. We ran to retrieve them. We had no idea what we found, so we scampered home before someone else tried to claim the lost items. Mother's mouth fell to the floor. She couldn't speak. She cried, choking back the tears. Can you imagine? We made 5 quilt tops, and now God has given us 5 quilt bats. Wow. Not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 quilt bats. Oh, wow. We had just witnessed the miracle. Our spirits ran high. Now we knew that the material for the quilt bats would soon be forthcoming. The next morning, Mother walked to the top of the lane to check for mail in her box. Mrs. Danzer, who lived across the road, was also there, waiting to talk with her. Mother was a little apprehensive. As she approached her, she wondered if Mrs. Danzer was going to claim the bats that had been found, but Mrs. Danzer smiled. I saw your kids all running home with quilt bats. Are you going to make quilts? Yes, I made 5 quilt tops. Now all I lack is the material for the backs. I hope you don't mind, but I have a trunk in my basement with yards of dark colored plaid flannel. I'll give it to you right now if you're interested. I can't imagine how that feels as a mom to be at a point where you're so desperate for something as simple as warmth, and how, things are happening that is allowing you to provide a little bit of something for your kids. Gratefully, Mother followed her into her basement. 20 minutes later, she emerged ecstatic with her new material. Rushing home, she sewed the flannel strips together, and one by one she laid the quilts on the floor, tying each one with colored yarn, securing the batting into place. The 5 quilts were beautiful. Mother valued them above anything else she owned. She often reminded us that these were the quilts that Faith had made. The Lord had provided. Stories like these, repeated at family gatherings, had helped me believe that God did love me and that he had graciously provided. I remembered another example, of his provision while we were at the Jordan River House. Onequa, Oneqa, elementary school held a food drive the week before Thanksgiving. Each student was expected to donate 2 cans of food to be distributed to the poor so they had food for the holiday. We were destitute, but no way were we going to show up at school empty-handed. If we did, it would prove to our peers how poor we really were. We'd never known the luxuries of canned food. As usual, Richard had a plan. Mom, let's all pretend we're sick so no one will know we don't have any canned food to take. At his insistence, Mother agreed, yet she secretly wanted us to attend the drive because she hoped that her children would somehow qualify to receive a box of donated food. Yeah. Wednesday evening came and went. She saw no chance of anyone supplying her family with a Thanksgiving dinner. We children could always detect her pain and depression. She took the guilt out on herself because she felt it was her personal failure that her kids were raggedy and hungry. So when she felt guilty, we felt guilty too. We all sensed we were a burden to her. But even in her sadness, she had a certain elegance. Her blonde hair was piled up high on her head, curled into small ringlets that softly fell about her forehead, accentuating her blue eyes. and Mother always powdered her face, which we suspect was to cover the redness under her eyes from crying again. We knew her usual ritual. When she put on her thin coat and left the house, she'd always refuse to allow any of us children to accompany her. She explained to us that it was her private time to think and pray. She felt that God could hear the pleas of her broken heart in the solitude of the calm, snowy night. We watched as she walked alone up the lane and finally out of sight into cold darkness. Later that evening, Mother would excitedly share the details. She had marched through the fresh snow, breathing into the collar of her thin navy coat, hoping to warm the air a little before it entered her lungs. The cold breaths made her breathing shallow. It hurt her lungs as she inhaled. She walked briskly in the deep snow toward the top of the unplowed snowy lane. Her heart raced as she cried out to God. She was freezing. Her cold toes tingled in her wet shoes. Please, God, don't let me down. My children need to have a Thanksgiving dinner. I can't go home empty-handed. She walked toward the only light in the starless night. The yellow glow from the light illuminated the old steel structure, which was a bridge spanning the Jordan River. The thick fog had settled in, making it impossible to recognize any vehicles that crossed the bridge unless they were right under the light. The main road desperately needed a snowplow to clear it again. An oncoming vehicle spun its wheels, almost sliding off the slippery road. She felt unsafe, a 39-year-old woman alone in the dark. The sound of grinding gears startled Mother. Headlights flashed in her eyes. She quickly crouched down, trying to hide beside the row of mailboxes. After the truck passed, she rose to her full height, hoping to catch a glimpse of the vehicle. The huge truck rattled as it crossed the bumpy snow-packed bridge. Mother had vaguely deciphered the writing painted on the side of the truck: wholesale produce. The truck gave a big bounce and rumbled on through the blizzard toward Redwood Road. Mother walked toward the steel bridge. There, by the dim light, she noticed that something was scattered in the snow. Evidently, the back door had been jarred open and something had fallen out from the truck. Back at the house, we were all worried because Mother had been gone too long. Douglas and Richard and I put on our coats and stood outside on the wooden narrow porch. We listened, hoping to hear Mother's footsteps in the dark. We faintly heard someone calling in the distance. Douglas, Richard, Irene. We listened again, realizing it was our mother calling. Alarmed that something had happened to her, all three of us hightailed it up the lane towards Mother's excited cries. There, in the freshly fallen snow, was a huge, broken cardboard box that had scattered assortments of food, including turkey, box stuffing, and cans of olives. We stood in awe, inspecting the labels of the cans by the bridge dim light. Mother loaded Richard's arms first, stacking produce tightly among the cans in his arms so it wouldn't fall. Then my arms were loaded next. Douglas held one side together of the torn box as Mother grabbed the other side. They both ran through the snow, pulling the heavy load for several yards, releasing the wet container momentarily to rest between labored breaths. Again, they picked up the sides on the cumbersome box, advancing down the lane, dragging it toward the house. That night, we got a real lesson on faith. For the first time, our eyes beheld cake mixtures, boxes of real butter, and minced meat. We discovered cranberry sauce, powdered sugar, and walnuts. Mother went into action immediately. She instructed Becky and me how to make Jell-O and other goodies. She whipped up 4 pumpkin pies, baking them late into the night. She needed to get them out of the way early so in the morning she could fill the oven with the stuffed turkey. At our tender ages, we learned that when Mother couldn't provide, she always mustered up her faith. Watching as God fulfilled his promises, we had longed for donations given at the food drive from school, but we thank God that he provided us with a meal better than the collected cans could ever give us. I desperately needed that trustworthy God now, as a new window with my own 7 mouths to feed. Chapter 8, Vulnerability. While I still believed there was a God and hope for his love and strength after Verlin's death, I felt God had let me down. My one purpose in life had been to serve him, but now I felt so abandoned. At 44 years old, the emptiness I experienced spiritually drained me. My self-esteem was next to nil. While sharing my husband with other wives, I'd lost my self-identity. Mistaken obedience and servitude snuffed out my feelings and desires. Who am I? What's my purpose? Would I ever experience real love again, a love of my own? The fears I'd harbored as a child were ever present, and the only safety I ever felt was when someone was with me. Although my history with men had been disastrous, I still wanted the security of having a man by my side. Here's the thing. I get it. Who doesn't want companionship? But it seems like you got to work on knowing who you are, in my opinion, especially at her age at 44, before you can worry about having another man. Because this whole time you've been living your life for others, doing what others want you to do, doing things because the man says, and now you're in a space where you can finally try to figure some stuff out for yourself. And to me, adding a man isn't what she needs right now. I knew I wanted more out of life, but hadn't a clue how to attain it. I couldn't even grasp the concept of a future. I had no idea as to what I really wanted because it seemed all my thinking had been done for me. Unless you've been there, you will never know the psychological pain that comes from all this brainwashing. I've been neglected and abused emotionally, spiritually, sexually, financially, and socially in every area of my life. It is so true. It is so true. Because here's the thing, even with the sexual stuff, it wasn't just the situation that happened with the guy that assaulted her. It was also with her own husband, because he used that act as control. He used it and said that it was only supposed to be for procreation, even though she showed him otherwise. He used that against her as well. He would punish her by not sleeping with her. So there was a lot going on there for her. So when she says in every area of her life, I believe it. All I knew was that I'd tasted freedom once, but retreated when overcome by mind-boggling circumstances. 8 years earlier, I'd suffered a nervous breakdown and even contemplated suicide. My greatest worry now was that I'd revert to that old situation again. I tried to muster up strength and show bravery. I displayed confidence, but my children saw through my facade. After weeks of assessment, I took the easier road, deciding to stay in Mexico. I owned a modest, comfortable home where I could continue to feel secure among lifelong friends. And even though my murderous brother-in-law, Ervil, was still at large, he moved with some of his 13 wives and 54 children to an area around Dallas, Texas. I wanted freedom, and yet we were surrounded by self-appointed guards who kept vigil over our people, making sure they were safe day and night from the Ervilites, whom we all feared. I desperately wanted love, but nearly every relationship with a man had broken my heart. What a dilemma. I was like a sitting duck, trapped in a deep, wide canyon of vulnerability where loneliness and unfulfillment enveloped me. I'd known Lane Stubbs since he was 10. His parents were one of the first families converted to the Church of the Firstborn. We had been the best of friends, even though he was 10 years my junior. Often he'd come to my home with 4 of his siblings where we gather for recreation. He would harmonize and play guitar while his sister Gay played the accordion. We all joined in singing the old familiar songs late into the evening. He was such a catch that at one time, when I was a follower, I tried to encourage my daughter Donna to marry him. He was very well respected and had been called to be an apostle in the Church of the Firstborn. I'd always had the knack of throwing a meal together in 10 or 15 minutes, so I proved myself again. Interesting that she wanted her daughter to marry in this thing. after all she'd been through. Let me continue. So I proved myself again when Lane showed up and we celebrated with a quick meal. Lane always felt free to drop by my house when he was hungry, and he never left disappointed. Now 34, he was 5'10", blonde, good looking, and had a heart of gold. He'd work on your car, fix your water pipes and electrical appliances, or hook up your butane tanks that were necessary for cooking. Money was accepted by Lane, but he loved being a servant. Most of the time, he insisted on blessing his family and friends without compensation. He was hard to get a hold of because he had two of his wives living out in the States. Kathy lived in El Paso, Texas, and Estella in Albuquerque, New Mexico. One sunny April day, I drove to Lane's mechanic shop. His blue eyes penetrated mine as I got out of my Datsun, greeting him with a warm hug. His shirt was greasy and sweat rolled down his forehead from the heat of the warm sun. His infectious smile made me tingle for some unknown reason. Irene! Irene be tingling for some of these men. Okay. We chatted while he fixed my car's window. I hadn't been able to roll it up, so I couldn't use my air conditioner. We reminisced about our childhoods as an hour of pleasure soon came to an end. How much do I owe you, Lane? He gave a little chuckle. I don't charge windows. This time, it's on me. When he wouldn't allow me to pay him, I tucked a few dollars into his dirty shirt pocket. This isn't pay. It's for tacos. I don't know what come over me, but I look for anything on my car that could possibly be repaired, such as a broken taillight. Each time our conversations were informative and long. What I learned about him gave me hope. His wife, Betty, who had given him 3 children, was on bad terms with him. She produced 7 children with her first husband, who was Lane's brother. I can't get with it. Oh, hey, Uncle Daddy. Like, what? I can't get with it. She lived on the outskirts of the colony where her children became her sole purpose. We could feel Betty's resentment toward Lane and couldn't fathom why they had such a rocky marriage when he was so loving and kind. Everyone who knew Lane assumed he was definitely not the problem. But Betty was a very good mother and a friend to everyone, and I admired her for her strength and calm spirit. On my 3rd visit, I knew I had fallen for him, like an elevator plunges into the basement. My only drawback was the 3 other wives. I feel like she associates like attention with a lot of things. And because he's giving her that, it creates her falling for these people because, like, we'll keep going. My only drawback was his other wives. I'd given up on polygamy because religion had completely delusioned me. But when I realized I was in love with him, okay, she in love, I decided I was not going to let this love pass me by. So I offered to feed Lane in lieu of the payment, telling him I'd rush home to prepare the meal and he could meet me at my place in 10 minutes. Over lunch, Lane saw how fidgety and nervous I was. I dared not look him in the eye for fear of revealing my feelings, yet I was too proud to tell him how I felt for fear of rejection. The way Lane glanced at me upon leaving, I was positive he knew I was in love with him. An hour later, my best friend Linda came barging through my screen door. Irene, Lane dropped by to see me. He said he thought you were in love with him, she chuckled, mocking in disbelief. He said he hoped it was true because if it was, he wants to marry you. Her critical laughter was punctured by my reply. It's true, Linda. If he said that, I will marry him. I was shocked at my own words, as was Linda. How crazy for me to entertain such an idea. If I did marry him, that would prove love was blind, deaf, and completely dumb. I'd seen religion interpreted to justify one's actions, yet I, who'd given up religion, had only love to justify mine. I drove down to his mechanic shop. I felt uneasy, mostly embarrassed because I made it very plain to him on several occasions that I would not share a man with another woman ever again. Now I knew we both had a problem. Can we talk? I asked rapidly, keeping my invitation on a fast, steady roll. Come on, let's go to the cottonwoods. He slid in beside me, adjusting the seat on the passenger side to accommodate his muscular legs. I was shaking with excitement, embarrassment, gullibility, and fear. Nevertheless, I drove through town, turning left on the dirt road, leading to the tall trees below the colony where we would have privacy and shade from the sweltering heat. Once we parked beneath the tall branches of the large cottonwoods, we opened both car doors to allow the cross breeze to give us relief from the heat. Lane spoke first, laughing as the words spilled out of his mouth. So do you want more than your car fixed? Okay, I'm going to keep reading, but isn't it interesting how when this very thing was happening to her, when her husband was seeing people behind her back, she was ramming vehicles and all that other stuff. And here she is opening the door to this situation. But let's keep reading. Irene, it's about time. Thank you. I turned red, blushing, trying to digest what he said. I smiled. Why did you tell Linda that you thought I was in love with you? Irene, I could see it written all over your face. I burst into tears. Lane, we have been such good friends, and I certainly do not want to do anything to jeopardize that. Besides, it would never work out between us. I want someone who loves and needs me, someone I can have all to myself. Lane smiled, then interrupted my complaint. I've been searching for the answers ever since I realized you had feelings for me. I've been mulling over things in my mind. If you marry me, I feel that I really lucked out because I'll be spending the biggest part of my time down here. I'll be able to see you almost every day. Through tears, I shouted my doubts and longings. He interrupted me, reaching over, pulling me into his arms. I feel so honored that you'd ever considered me. I've always loved you. That's all he had to say. Because we know this is something that she lacks. This is something that she wasn't told and all those other things. This is going to be interesting. No, I want to be loved more than just a friend. Irene, imagine being best of friends. Most people would give their eye teeth for that kind of relationship. We'll be way ahead of everyone else. He surprised me with a kiss on the cheek. Don't worry. You've always been my mentor. We'll just take the next step. We'll go from being friends to being lovers. Alone in the bed that night, fighting old religious tapes played over and over in my mind, conjuring up prophetic warnings of my fate. I'd been taught that I must be married by the priesthood in the name of God. Yet I wasn't going along with the fundamentalist way of life. So I knew there was no possible way I could get married to him because he was married legally to his wife, Estella, in Albuquerque. All my life, I lived someone else's script, trying to please God, my relatives, and my late husband. I decided it was my turn to do something for myself. Therefore, I decided to throw all caution to the wind by deciding to have a private ceremony in my home with my children and a few close friends. My most important guest would definitely be my best friend, Linda. Linda shook her head in bewilderment. Still, unable to comprehend the fact that I'd actually decided to marry Lane. Why would you ever want to marry him? What's in it for you? I hadn't thought too deeply about what he had to offer me. All I knew was that I was in love and no one would stop me. Linda expressed her concern again, only because she couldn't come up with a single intelligent reason for me to proceed, so she challenged me. Just name one thing that a greasy mechanic can do for you. Well, I replied, trying to keep a straight face, he can definitely jumpstart my motor, give me a lube job, and fix my rear end. Irene is a mess. I've never felt such intense feelings for anyone in my life. Yet, I knew my children were against my decision to marry Lane. 12 days before I said my vows, I wrote to Donna. Her children were against it. Is history repeating itself in some ways? Because she's doing the very thing that her mother did. Let's hope it's not the same situation, but I'm just saying. June 13th, 1982. My darling Donna, I've thought about you so much since you left, and it makes me feel sad to think that all of you are so upset. I'll tell you one thing for sure. I'm absolutely crazy about Lane and in love. Nobody can change my mind about him. Okay, Christine. Sorry, I'm thinking about the Browns. It seems so natural to hold and kiss him. He sees me every day. He took me to a community dance and he held my hand throughout the entire evening. We just let the world gasp. Many people raise their eyebrows because he is 10 years my junior. He was here for 3 days and asked me to marry him on the 25th if he can make it. So I'm going Tuesday to San Diego to get some shoes and a dress. I will have Steven's wife, Nancy, make a 3-tiered cake. We will serve ice cream and punch. Linda is giving me away. I'll be married in my living room at 8 p.m. It may seem crazy to everybody else, but I adore him. He ran in last night to tell me goodbye and kissed me 20 times. Juicy. She sounds like a kid. Reading this letter, it sounds like a kid, not a 44-year-old writing. And I cried when he left. So what can I say? If it lasts a week, I want it. The town has gossiped and criticized and had so much to say, but I couldn't care less. It will be private with special guests in my home. I feel like I am 16 again, and you sound 16 too. And for once, I'm doing what I want to do. My heart skips a beat every time he enters or I see his truck go by. So your fat mama is robbing the cradle. Please be happy because I am. I'm about to untie my tubes and have a little Lane. Joking. Yeah, you better be joking. I adore you. Love, Mama. Lane and I repeated our own vows so everyone would know we were a serious item. It was considered taboo by faithful fundamentalists to participate in such a godless ceremony. Wow. I was defying the priesthood as well as giving no recognition to the presiding religious leader. We celebrated in my home with those I loved who believed I had a right to make my own choices. Linda helped my teenage daughter serve the refreshments. After the wedding, in a conversation with Linda, she surprised me by asking a question out of the clear blue. What do you think this union will be all about? It will be between love and principle. I surprised myself when I said it. I had to laugh at myself for giving her such a weird and unexpected answer. With Lane, I set out on a new adventure. After 28 years of waiting in line with multiple other wives for my turn, I now had someone who pursued me, who didn't demand I think or believe exactly as he did. The very best thing was that I had nothing to do with his other wives and family since they lived in the States. I felt like the mistress. I don't know if that's a good thing. She has pictures. Lane and me on our wedding day leaving for our honeymoon. You can barely see it. That's the only thing I don't like about this computer thing is that I can't show y'all the pictures like that. Y'all know I'm not tech savvy. For the first time in 45 years, I began to blossom. I was completely enamored for 3 exhilarating years of butterflies and torrid passion, but it was much more. I spent hours reading faith-promoting stories to him. We laughed and joked, just enjoying each other's company. He showed me a new world. He took me dancing, which I loved and longed to experience with Verlin. But with all his responsibilities and numerous wives, was unable to. Lane loved the movies. He took me at least twice a week. I loved eating popcorn and sharing a jumbo Coke as we held hands and cuddled, relaxing in each other's arms. Our days and nights were filled with laughter. The strong connection we had was simply that. Nothing could have kept me from him. He fed my hunger, my love-starved desires, and famished longings within. And as crazy as it may sound, I felt destined to be in this relationship. For the first time in my life, I felt valued. Lane put me upon a pedestal, thinking I was the perfect woman. He praised me for raising my 13 kids, thinking I had a wonderful family. He was impressed at the strong, loving bonds I'd instilled in them. One of my greatest rewards over the years has been when dozens of young men and women remind me of my hospitality. They never fail to share their gratitude and inform me of the joy they've experienced as a child in my home. I believe that joy comes about through service, so all of us were blessed. Lane himself held many precious memories of all the free meals and attention he personally enjoyed throughout the many years I'd known him. He couldn't begin to explain how pleased he was that I entertained everyone, seeming to meet their needs. I explained that I tried to live by my favorite saying, love is fulfilling the needs of another, thereby fulfilling your own, and now he could be part of it permanently. Shortly after my marriage, I canned 62 jars of chicken. My son Brent killed all of his roosters and let me have whatever I wanted for doing the work. I love to have plenty of canned food on my shelves, so I put up 80 quarts of corn and 45 quarts of apple juice. Of course, I never fail to stock up on homemade apple preserves. Because of Lane's former years immersed in religion, he felt it was wrong to want nice things and fancy clothes. He considered this prideful. Therefore, his aspirations were very low. All anyone needs is enough to eat and a place to sleep regardless of the conditions. He was satisfied to wear cast-off clothes and hand-me-down shoes. He mistakenly thought it was a sign of humiliation. Because of this belief, his family suffered. Being the rescuer that I am, I spent my share of the money from Verlin's insurance policy to fix up Lane's place. Oh, wow. No matter how often the neighbors complained about his cows being in their alfalfa fields, Lane seemed to ignore that fact and did nothing. So the first challenge I accepted was to buy cedar posts, barbed wire, and metal clamps. I paid workers to refence his property so the cattle wouldn't run loose. This ended the problem with his angry neighbors. Just beyond Lane's mechanic shop was an open well, 14 feet in diameter. An electric pump sucked the water out into a metal tank, storing it for Lane's 2 vacant homes. The well was deep and dangerous. I about had a fit when I discovered a drowned calf floating in the murky water. Warp boards and debris polluted the stagnant water. My greatest fear was that one of the children would wander out of the shop, then fall into the deep well and drown. And I thank God that no one was drinking that putrid water. When I expressed my worries to Lane, he laughed it off. I thought you were a woman of faith. Believe me, God helps those who help themselves. It's a crime not to cover that well. It's foolish on your part to take a chance on someone losing his or her life. We argued for a minute or two. Then he made light of it, admitting it wasn't a priority because he couldn't afford it. The next time Lane went to haul a few loads on his semi from El Paso to Albuquerque, I paid 2 hired men to bring steel bearing and cement. First, they pumped the well almost dry. Then they removed all the trash, rotten cardboard, and any foreign objects so that eventually the water would be usable in the houses again. I went out to Lane's farm the day of the job was completed to inspect the work and make sure it was done right. I approached Lane's brother, Richie, talking to my workmen. Wow, Irene, I'm so darn excited you've covered this well. It has been a constant worry to me, especially since Betty divorced me and married Lane. I feared my children would accidentally fall in and drown. I asked Lane on many occasions to do something about it, but he always ignored me. How did you ever convince him to let you cover it? I thought to myself, wishing I had the guts to say it out loud. If you were that concerned about your children, why didn't you take action and have it covered yourself? But I bit my tongue. I knew Richie was as penny pinching as his brother. Instead, I laughed. I just took it upon myself, waiting for Lane to get out of the way long enough for me to take care of this problem. Besides, haven't you heard? If you want anything done, just ask a busy woman. Lane kept an old blue Ford parked in El Paso at Kathy's. We used to run it around. Not only was it beat up, but it would never start on its own. Lane would instruct me to push on one side of the car while he exerted all his strength pushing on the other. We jogged along as fast as possible. Then he'd jump in and throw it into gear and pump the gas like crazy to get it started. We were quite a spectacle. Me in the new red heels, navy pants, and red blouse and matching earrings with perfectly coiffed hair. Just swallowed my pride each time, praying the car would start so I could jump into the passenger seat out of the spectator's view. Finally, after the second incident, I inquired what the problem was, hoping I could give Lane the money to fix it. When I mentioned it, he scolded me. It's always started when we pushed it, and you shouldn't be so prideful. See, it's not always, you don't always know about people like you think you do, and this is how she's figuring it out. Like, he's good at in some ways, but in other ways he's not. I'm starting to get this feeling about Lane. About the fourth occasion, I was beyond humiliated. A driver behind us yelled at Lane as the light turned green. You're an idiot for allowing a woman to engage in such an unladylike activity. As I jumped in the car, I was not only humiliated, but boiling mad. Lane, I'll never push your stupid car again, I promise. Tell me what the problem is so we can fix it. I'll even pay for it. What nonsense. Why fix something if it works? Besides, it's just the starter and we're doing fine. So it makes absolutely no sense to waste money to buy a new one. What? Yes. How much does it cost? I'm sure it's not that expensive. No, it doesn't cost that much, but when we can save a few bucks, we need to do it. I didn't want to cause a fight, but I insisted we stop at Pep Boys and buy a starter. When he saw how upset I was, he finally gave in. I heard it said that if two people thought exactly alike, one was unnecessary. People's differences were challenges which caused growth. In spite of Lane and I being as opposite as night and day, we had the greatest communication ever. I guess I thrived in his presence because he listened to me. I never had anyone who seemed so appreciative for all that I did for him. Everyone in town saw the change in Lane. He was well-groomed, dressed in his new clothes I bought for him after much resistance. He seemed to make an impression on all who knew him. I always felt that what he needed was a little tender love and care, and boy, did I pour it on. My feelings for Lane became stronger every day. I'd never felt such extreme happiness. And that is the end. I'm just happy that we're finally talking about some new stuff because this is what we've been waiting for. I've read the comments. I know how I feel myself, and it's just good that finally we got something. So go ahead and do me a favor, hit the like button, because that's where we're stopping now. What do we think about her and Lane? Do we think it was too soon? Do we think that she should have took her kids into consideration when she did this? Let me know. Until next time.